It's Jason here from KC&H Custom Guitars again. I'm going to continue on the refinish and relic of this Epiphone Les Paul Gothic. And as you can see, quite a bit of work has been done since my last video. Last video was on prepping wood for paint. So, if you're at that step, go ahead back and check out that video before you watch this one. So, I'm going to go through all the different things that I've done since my last video. The customer wanted a binding on this guitar, and this guitar was a studio, so it had no binding. So first thing we did was I primed the whole thing after I prepped for paint after last video with just used a little Rust-Oleum spray primer. And after I did that, I flat sanded it with 320 grit paper just to get it real nice and smooth. And then we decided we wanted to do just a white binding around the outside that was kind of an off-white. So I decided to paint around all the edges with some ivory white colored paint, and then I put a little lacquer on top to protect it. Once I did that, I used a pinstriping tape, which is much more accurate than your normal blue masking tape, and we pinstriped around the top and the sides. And then after that, gave the guitar the top paint coat for the top and the back and sides. So for the top, what I used, another Rust-Oleum, just a good spray paint. This is Ocean Mist, a gloss. I painted that, and then I moved on to the back, painted the back with this Balin Encore Brown. It's lacquer paint. Painted that, painted the neck, everything. Once I was done that, I took the tape off, cleaned it up, sanded it, got everything smooth as possible. And the way I do that before I put lacquer on is I'll just lightly sand with 320 and maybe hit it with 800 wet dry. I'll hit it wet dry and clean it all up. And then at that point, I was ready to lacquer. As you can see, I relic this guitar, and the way I do my relics when I relic a guitar is I make it perfect first, because a real vintage guitar starts its life out as a perfect guitar from a factory, so that's how I started. I lacquered it. I used this Deft gloss lacquer. It's nitrocellulose. I put about a whole can on between the neck, the back, the top, everything. And then I wet sanded that with 800 and 1,000 and some spots 2,000 just to get it as smooth as I possibly could. Once I got the guitar as perfect as possible, I went about with the aging process. Now the aging process is multiple steps. You see lots of people do it at home, and maybe they take a screwdriver to a guitar and some nails and keys or something and make a bunch of different marks. That's not the best way to get it. What I did is I put all the big markings in first, and what I use almost by itself is a razor blade. I chip it away, I scratch it away. I might use a screwdriver or chisel a little bit here and there. And the best way to do it is you hit it in certain spots and get the lacquer and the paint to chip off. I think is the most realistic way to get your big markings to look. After that, I sand it some more, I get those smooth. Then I'll usually use a dark stain and rub in all the battle wounds, get them to get dark like they have dirt and grime in them from years of playing. Sand some more with a high grit sandpaper. Usually I'm using the 800, and I'll wet sand most of that just to really be careful with it and smooth it out real nice. After that, to get some of the yellowing that looks pretty good from a vintage guitar, like it's been played in bars, smoky bars for years and years, is I'll use where do I got this? Starcast Amber. It's also a Balin product. The Amber and the Encore Brown are great colors to use together to get like a vintage sunburst, but I use this to get that yellowy, smoky look. So what I'll do is I'll just give it a light coating kind of around the edges here and there, let it dry for a day or so, and then come back, do some more sanding. I'll usually use wet sanding on this, and I'll just wet sand it and wipe it off, look at it, just kind of see how it's looking to make it, the color and the aging look as natural as possible. So that is an overview of how I aged the paint and the body. Now you can see the top, and then I also did the back. Some of this, you can see some of the white underneath. I sanded some of these areas. I razor bladed them. It's just, you got to look at pictures, and you need to look at old guitars that have really naturally gotten this age and kind of try to mimic the wear spots as naturally as possible. So another thing is hardware. Every single piece on this guitar has been taken off and aged because, well, it doesn't look very good if you have a beat up guitar like this with brand new shiny hardware. So what I use, I take every piece off, and I'll take like 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'll hit them a little bit in different spots, just real random. And then I use Ferric Chloride. I got this off Amazon, and you can buy it. I think you used to be able to buy it at Radio Shack and stuff. And I sit it in there, all the hardware, I sit it in there and let it age. And it's I'm sure it's probably hard to see on the camera, but you can just see how it just gives it some patina and just makes it look kind of beat up. With the tuners, I wrapped them up in a paper towel and soaked the paper towel with it so that chemicals weren't going inside the tuner where there's gearing and stuff like that to ruin that. So I did that with every single screw, every piece. On the pickups, I took a Q-tip and I rubbed the Ferric Chloride on all the pole pieces. And I didn't leave it on there very long. Just kind of put some on, wiped it off, kind of see how it was doing. Because it will continue to react even in the next day once you wipe it off. And then for things like this, plastic knob, these were obviously all the numbers were very white, you know. I used the Starcast Amber again. It gives it, I just shoot it a little bit, and then I wet sand it with some 1000 just to kind of get the shine and stickiness off. Same thing with the white strips on the 3-ply pick guards. So that is pretty much the entire aging process, and I think I've covered about everything very quickly. Obviously, this takes a lot of time if you want to do it right. It takes me layers of building color, sanding color off, putting marks on, sanding it down, and just trying to make it look as natural as possible. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and thanks for watching. See ya.